Hello, everyone. Lucy Heavens here with another episode of CMO Therapy, a podcast that's hopefully going to help you navigate your way through your marketing journey. Because let me tell you, I get it. Being a marketing leader is no walk in the park. In each episode, we dive headfirst into the world of marketing, where uncertainty, tight budgets, and fierce competition are just the beginning of the rollercoaster ride. But guess what? You are not alone in this journey. Why go solo when you can tap into the powerhouse of insights from some of the most awesome marketing leaders in the game? And look, the title might include the word therapy, but we are not talking about challenges here. We are tackling them head on. So join us as we deep dive into the nitty gritty, share war stories, and unlock secret strategies. And get ready for no holds barred conversations, because sometimes I have no filter. So if you're a chief marketing officer, a marketing lead, or someone just looking to up their marketing game, then I am so glad that you are here with us today. And today I am very glad to have the awesome Sharon Hegarty here with me. Sharon, can you give a little bit of a quick intro for the audience, please?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for the invite, Lucy. I'm Sharon. I've been in marketing all my working life. I've built and scaled brands at BBC Studios, Sky, Samsung, Virgin Media, always leading growth strategy across quite large portfolios. And I've always been in telecoms and media, and mainly in D2C. More recently, I've started working with a hair and skincare startup called Joe Nova as fractional CMO. So something completely different, but something that I've really wanted to try for a number of years now, to sort of step out of corporate, but still bringing that same focus on sustainable growth, just in a far more hands-on environment, should I say. And I think that's what we're going to get into today.
We are definitely, yeah. I love that hands-on. We had a chat before, and we decided that on a title for the podcast, which is Big Brand Muscle Startup Hustle. I love that.
Love that,
And we
yeah.
chose this title because being a marketing leader in a big company is one thing, right? But doing it in a small business or a startup, totally different sport. Suddenly you are not just leading a strategy, you are building the engine, fixing the engine, and explaining the engine to the CEO at the same time. So as you mentioned, you've done both. So you've worked for those big companies, those big giants like Samsung, BBC, but also for smaller teams where you're basically like the marketing Swiss Army knife. So that's what we're going to unpack is like what skills can you transfer over there? What do you need to unlearn? I'm quite interested in how your network around you kind of becomes a bit of your secret weapon as well. So yeah, let's dig into it. I'm really super interested to hear from you. So let's start off with that, the kind of the big brands. When you started working for a smaller startup or smaller startups, what surprised you the most, would you say?
Well, I think, working in a big brand, you're sort of reliant on that, the big frameworks around you and the support that you get. And, big brands have already got that big brand equity, really specialist teams around you, the governance, the processes, the guardrails, and just the sheer scale of people and expertise. And sometimes big brands can be slow at making decisions. I get that. But once they do make a decision, they can really execute at scale. Now, startups, very different. It's very, the flip side of that is that it can be quite quick in terms of decision making, but the infrastructure is just not there. I mean, I think you touched on it earlier. You're sort of building it as you're doing it. And that surprised me the most because we take that infrastructure for granted. So when it's not there, resources are tight, budget's tight, there's no real data and insight. You're really reliant on your own background and expertise. And that's one thing that, not surprised, but I am, I got into marketing because I love marketing. I love that creative process. And you are quite self-reliant. So you've got to trust yourself a lot more, I think. And there's a bit of self-discovery there as well, because I've sort of realised I'm actually quite good at marketing. Well, and I don't say that glibly, but when you are in big corporate organisations, it's a massive engine. It's slick. There's lots of people involved in that process. Whereas in a startup, it's really you driving it. So, if there's a problem, it's you. If it's just the strategy, if it's the website, if it's you need some copy, it's very hands-on, and it's just very different. But you could take more risks in a way, but at the same time, risks can cost a lot. I think that's it, because it feels so much so more personal, I think, than
Yeah.
that corporate. So I feel very invested. Not that wasn't invested in corporate, but it does feel a lot more personal for sure.
That's really interesting, and yeah, I love what you picking up on something you said at the start there, which I think I had a similar sort of journey when I started my fractional journey a year or so ago. But it was really interesting to me how the way I look at things, I kind of put things into sort of like three boxes. It's almost always like people, process, or tech, right?
Yeah.
And it's normally the people and the process that you kind of flip to first. Like, is there a bit of a skills kind of gap that we have, maybe that we could fill with some, I don't know, some agencies or something like that? Is there some technology that we can bring? Like, that's where your mind flip first. But the thing that I've appreciated the most since since starting my fractional journey is actually the power of the process.
Mm.
I think, having worked in those big companies, you go in there and there's normally all those processes laid out for you, right? But then in a startup, you have to go and start them all, like write them
Create
all,
them.
or create them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where you can bring that big brand experience to a smaller business. The principles don't change. You still need that sort of that framework. It's just maybe delivered in a slightly different way. It's not that linear, but I think that really helps. That commercial sort of acumen is required. The frameworks, the KPIs, the go-to-market strategy, all of that still, applied in the same way in a smaller business, because I think sometimes there's more to lose and risk in a smaller business. Budgets are really tight. Resource is a very small resource, and I sort of miss that, the support of people around you. But in terms of taking that big brand thinking, I think absolutely it can work in a smaller business. It's not that linear.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you was there anything in particular that you found kind of be like easier than working for a big company, like now sort of working for a small company?
I think just sort of making decisions quicker. In large businesses, quite rightly, it can take a long time. You're doing your sort of annual planning, quarterly planning, has to go through a lot of sort of process sign-offs, and that's right, because a lot of the companies I've worked in, there's a lot of big budgets, big targets. So it's quite right that you have those guardrails. But in a smaller business, we are just making decisions quite quickly on a daily basis. Yes, we've done planning. I do have a PowerPoint deck somewhere, but once we've done it, we're just getting on with it. So it's really that sort of the ease of decision making has been, quite easy and quite refreshing. But I go back to being reliant on your own decision making, because people look to me. I work with a founder. We're a very small team. There's a founder, there's myself and Olivia, who does all our CX and digital and brand, and then we've got a small PR team, an external team. So I'm advising the founder all the time, and they sort of look to me as being the final decision maker. And you've got to be comfortable with that, because in previous roles, yes, I've been the senior leader, marketing leader, but you've always got your boss to lean on, or other colleagues to lean on, or check in, or whatever it might be. But in a startup, you don't. So you have to sort of make the decision and be quite decisive. You can't flip flop around. You've got to say, right, we're doing it. Let's crack on and do it, try it. And that's quite energizing as well, because you can deliberate for a long time. And if you deliberate too long, the world's moved on. You've got to be pretty agile and adaptable these days. And, at the end of the day, you've got to know your customer and how to deliver and be relevant as a brand to the customer, especially in hair and beauty, which is, it's so competitive. And we're trying to carve out an area for, women over 40 who have hair care problems, hormonal change. So we're quite specific after what we're going after. But it's just making sure that we're really focused and being decisive, and just going after it and not always thinking, oh, I've got to test everything. It's quite refreshing as well in a way, but a little bit scary at the same time because you can't predict the success. And that's also the challenge. You're forecasting to a point, but in a bigger organization, you've got that legacy, you've got that insight, the data, the forecasting tools. In a startup, you don't have that. So you are quite reliant on your own expertise, but benchmarking, and you can forecast to a point, but you can't forecast completely to its success. You've just got to try stuff, which again, I think is quite exciting as well. A little bit scary.
That's good. I was gonna ask you kind of like how you, what your sort of, I suppose, formula is for making decisions like that, like what makes you comfortable with making decisions. But I think you just kind of answered it there at the end. So it's really just making sure that you've got those benchmarks then. Is that how it works for you?
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's still going back to those core principles of understanding who your customer is. At the end of the day, being very clear on your proposition, authentic in your positioning as a brand, your pricing, your competitors. So all of that, we are doing ourselves. I don't have a team doing, but that's the fundamental part of using those core marketing principles to apply there. That doesn't change. It's just that you're relying on that and your own expertise without having sort of support of a larger organization. But I think if you're very clear on focused on what you're trying to achieve, then that's sort of your North Star. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, we're trying to build a brand. We're trying to obviously drive that awareness, engagement, and ultimately drive sales for a new hair care and skin startup in D2C, but also looking at other third-party support. So, and there's sales targets to hit. So we're all very focused on what we need to achieve, and it's just how we get there. So as long as we're clear on that and very clear on who our audience is and not to get distracted, I think that's the other thing, is making sure that we can get distracted from opportunities that come in, and we can spend a lot of time going after something that may or may not be right because someone's approached us. You get quite excited when an external party approaches you and oh my gosh, someone's heard of us. But it's just staying quite focused. When you're a small business with limited resource, you've just got to, stay focused, and you can't, get too distracted, or else you will end up flip-flopping. And we're just trying to stick to not a plan, because that sounds like we're too rigid, but just staying quite focused in terms of what we want to achieve this year.
It's really interesting when I hear sort of people, sort of talking, I suppose, about, well, whenever I'm asked as well about the difference between sort of big company and then small company and what it's like to be marketing leader. But it's really funny when you break it down and just use the same like wording. It doesn't change for both. It's just kind of a little bit of context. So what I mean by that is, like you just mentioned there about, staying focused. You've got limited resources. At the same time, when you've got a big team, you have that sort of same problem of people kind of getting distracted and you just kind of going off, off track a little bit. So yeah, I think, it sort of seems, doesn't it? Like big company, small company, have your strategy, kind of just, stick to it. That seems like the key, right?
Well, it's the same, right? It says, what are the core KPIs? What's the commercial plan? What's the marketing plan to support that commercial plan? And but I think with bigger companies, it's that 70-20-10 rule though, isn't it? It's like, 70% of your marketing spend will be on, your plan, 20% of optimization, and you've got sort of 10% to play around with. And so you can go after other stuff. In a startup, you don't sort of have that 70-20-10, you can't, if you spend too much time on the other bits, you're not doing your core. And so you have to be quite disciplined with your time and, not to be grumpy about not new ideas, because you want to get there. But if you don't get the first bit right, if you don't get to at least start up, scale up, those other opportunities, there's no point. So it's just being quite disciplined, which is another learning really, because I get excited about new stuff. I'm like, oh, shiny stuff over here, oh, shiny stuff over there. Whereas here, I can't afford to do that. I have to be the one that's trying to keep the team on track and the founder on track, for sure, because he's got lots of ideas, as a lot of founders do. But I have to sort of rein him in a bit. I think he probably thinks, oh God, here comes grumpy Sharon. But it's not about that. It's about, keeping, and I'm sure Josie wouldn't mind me saying this, but just keeping us focused on what we want to deliver and what we want to do in terms of driving and building this brand.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So if CMO or like marketing director, I mean, it's such a, it can be very different if it's your job title. I'm wondering, in your opinion, like what it looks like from a different, like an actual day-to-day perspective. Like, in big organizations, where does your time go? In small organizations, like where does your time go on a daily basis? Yeah, you can have the same job title as marketing director or CMO. What
Yeah.
do you think?
Very different, in large organizations, there's obviously a lot of time on internal meetings, that those strategy setting, that vision, and those core KPIs, the planning sessions, but internal meetings, governance, budget meetings, trading and performance meetings, at the same time involved with, agencies, cross-functional alignment, which is really important. As a marketing leader in a corporate organization, I always say my job is to join the dots and tell the story, and joining the dots is really hard because you're the one that's constantly trying to work across your sales counterparts, your commercial counterparts, distribution, and be the glue, if you like. So I've spent a lot of my time doing that, being the glue, to really help drive then marketing's performance in terms of delivering the commercial outcomes for the business. But a lot of my time is focused on that, whereas and also building and leading teams. So a lot of my time would be taken up with coaching, leading my teams, recruiting teams, building high performing teams, which I love doing. I love seeing my team succeed. I love the coaching and mentoring part of my job. But yearly reviews, quarterly reviews, all of that stuff takes time. Whereas I've always loved the creative process, and that's why I got into marketing in the first place. And in a startup, I'm so much closer to that coal face in terms of creating a brand from scratch, defining what the brand stands for, the proposition, getting involved in everything from pricing to, our purpose and even the look and feel of the brand. But also be involved in everything from website copy, CRM, trying to get my head around Wix, which is, to working with the PR team, to responding to external parties coming to us who may want to work with us, partnerships. So just it's just been, a lot more hands-on and involved in all aspects of the business, working with the founder, planning product development over the next 12 months. So it's literally every single touch point I'm involved in. And so I don't, there's not a power, as I said earlier, not lots of PowerPoint forecasting reporting. We do some, but it's a lot more operational. So it's just different. You're everything from a operator, strategist, firefighter. So it is different. And, I wouldn't say I like one or the other. I've loved I've worked with some amazing businesses. I've been, very lucky in the companies I've worked in. So this is just different, but it's I think it's quite energizing though, and I'm also learning a lot because even the tools, AI, I'm also talking to a lot of smaller agencies as well. I've always worked with big networks, but there are a lot of fantastic new agencies popping up, TikTok agencies, Instagram agents, just who I'm also learning from for sure. So being at the coalface of things changing every day is again quite energizing. I think keeps you relevant as well, and you're learning on the job all the time. So I'm quite comfortable with that.
Sorry to interrupt, but if you're liking this chat, then please follow CMO Therapy so your ears don't miss out on our next big marketing meltdown or breakthrough. Either way, it's a good time. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, I've done the whole big company, sort of small company, like startup thing, but I think there's something with startups about, kind of just makes you learn a little bit faster, I think. You have to.
Yeah, because I also think, when you're a senior marketing leader, you do get removed from the customer, because you're doing all of the more corporate side of things, stakeholder management, everything else. So sometimes you're looking at your teams going, "Oh, I want to be doing what you're doing. You're having all this fun," and getting that enjoyment, I said, from the creative process. That's why you become a marketer in the first place, right? You're trying to deliver something that a customer wants. So that's the bit I'm quite enjoying, actually, and seeing that almost instant response to a lot of the stuff that we put out. We can test quite easily. we can test our channels quite easy. We're not in that many channels, but our social channels, and we can test and learn quite quickly. We can turn things on and off quite quickly. So it's been able to respond quicker as well. So yeah. So it's just different, but.
What's some of the kind of habits that you have taken from some of your roles at like Sky and the BBC and that, and that you can take into a small business?
I think it's that smaller startups can, and I've only worked with a couple, but I mean, just from the founders I've spoken to, they can be quite not chaotic, but just not. I'm a planner, right? I can't work in chaos. I mean, if anyone listening here has worked with me before, but I am a planner. I like to have clear commercial KPIs, forecasting discipline, structured go-to-market, because I really think those processes ultimately will help your business drive to a better outcome and be more efficient, actually, and more effective if you have those things in place. So there are the things that I have brought over. So clear commercial KPIs, forecasting discipline, to as much as we can. We sales forecast for the year, understanding our margins, really important, because I'm working with hair product. I've always worked in subscriptions mainly, not so much physical products. I've worked with mobile handsets and stuff, but pricing on a hair care product is very different to a mobile phone. So understanding product margins, but that structured go-to-market, test and learn. We don't have a lot of media, so it's quite organic. But again, understanding the media frameworks and role clarity, and we are a small team, but keeping that team tight and motivated is really, really key. So all of those things happen in big businesses. Yeah. It's just the way it's been delivered. So, I'm not doing 40-page PowerPoint decks. I'm not sort of trying to over-engineer attribution or anything like that. And I'm not, we're trying to do quick decisioning. Now, I do have a PowerPoint deck, but the founders aren't that bothered about it. I mean, most of our conversation and decisions happen on WhatsApp. Yeah. He knows what I'm doing. I've taken him through the plan. He's like, yeah, let's just crack on. So it's the same principles, but it's just in terms of how it's executed and delivered is just slightly different. I need those things. He doesn't necessarily need those things, but I know I need them to help us get to where we're going. So it's just the delivery of those things. So that's the stuff I would bring. And said in terms of getting rid of, you don't need the lots of PowerPoint and excessive decision-making process, because we're a small business, we're a small team, so we can make the decisions quite quickly.
Yeah. When you say the word process, it always has that kind of negative sort of connotation, doesn't it? You always think of this like you said, like 40-page slide PowerPoint deck or something like that. But a process could literally mean, this is how I'm going to follow up after an event that we do or something like that. It's these 6 steps. But at least then that you've got those 6 steps kind of documented down, and you're doing the same thing every time. You're not having to sit there and think, oh, well, what do I have to do now?
And I think that's really important, because process doesn't kill creativity. I think, as I just mentioned, if you have like a good go-to-market planning process, if you've got shared KPIs across your business, and you're all aligned with your priorities, and this is how we're going to go to market, and this is the quarterly plan, that is the process. Then you can sort of get on with doing it. And then if someone says, well, why are you doing that? That's a great campaign. Well, why have you done it? You said, well, that's what we agreed in our go-to-market plan. Oh yeah, of course, off you pop then. So, and if you have those agreed priorities and KPIs, it frees you then to actually get on and do the good stuff that you want to do. So you're right, process isn't just, got to have a process and slow you down. For me, I think it actually makes you more effective and more efficient in your approach. So, not planning and not process for process sake. It's about putting the right one in place for your business.
Yeah, I like that. I'd like to ask a question about kind of like tools. What's your kind of, that's one of the things I think always with big company, small company, right? Is you go from having kind of all of these tools at your disposal and all of these different, ways to sort of optimize some of the things you're doing, to suddenly then having, a Google suite and a spreadsheet and good old Google Docs. But yeah, what's your MVP, I suppose, for the sort of minimum tech stack that you would have for a small company, small operations?
So I mean, again, from a tech perspective, yeah, I've gone from using, yeah, all those big named tech stacks to quite small, really. I mean, we're using a CRM system, we're using Wix, we're using a CRM system that's which isn't great. Sorry, I keep calling out Wix. So no one's listening from Wix. But, in terms of CRM, we're using Google Analytics, we're using yes, we use Adobe for our we use the Adobe Suite, we use Illustrator, so because we create a lot of content ourselves,
Yeah.
and we're working across Meta and Google, but that's really about it. So
Yeah.
we do all our own analytics from the limited media we have, and then we are quite reliant on AI. I'm getting my head around. Pretty good at Copilot, Chat, Claude. They've become my extended marketing team, so I'm getting more familiar with those types of products. But at the end of the day, in terms of minimal viable proposition, it's really important that we're very targeted in terms of who our customer is. Having a very clear ICP, it's really important, and that go to market approach and plan and pricing, and just being really clear on our positioning, promotion strategy, to deliver against all of that.
Yeah. Okay. So I think if we let's talk about priorities. You mentioned that a minute ago, and this is the one that's always kind of the one that gets me the most, because everything's always a priority, right? Like every day there's always the next idea that somebody's got, it's that's suddenly a priority. I think you've kind of already answered this with the sort of the staying on track of, having your plan and like sticking to it. But how do you decide like when to pivot, like when you need to kind of like switch gears and change your priority?
I think when something's not working, right, you know, you can keep going with something. So yes, and you can have a plan in place, but things change all the time. Daily changes, what's trending. I spend quite a lot of time on Instagram, TikTok, understanding what's trending at any one point in time. So it would be bit madness if to say, right, this is our plan, we're going to stick to it because something else has launched in the market, or
Or they change the algorithm and
exactly. And they change the algorithms all the time. So we're quite, I say we, Olivia, who I work with, she's, pretty hot on the algorithms because Meta changes their algorithms all the time. So for a small business, you've got to really be on top of all of that. And I didn't probably didn't really appreciate that in big brand stuff, when you're working with your media agencies and the algorithms change, and everyone's saying now, well, AI can do it all. Well, no, you still need someone on it and understanding it, and it's having those tools to hand. But ultimately, and if there's an opportunity that comes in that makes sense for us, we'll do it. There's been quite a few opportunities that have come away, and whether that's been doing events, for example, we don't have a events team, so we've had a couple of opportunities where we're working with a media partner and they've invited us to events and we've managed to pull it off, and it's like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it, because it gets us close to the customer. When you're trying to build a D2C brand, you need to be closer to the customer as well. Joe Nova, actually Joseph, the founder, is a hairdresser, so he built his brand, his business based on feedback from his customers, and that's why he built his range of products based on his customer needs from the salon. And that's great because we can use that pool of customers for our customer research, and getting that feedback loop has been really important to us in terms of testing new products. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, we're focused, but if there's opportunities that come along that we think is the right thing, then we will pivot and do it, because you never know where those opportunities will take you. And we get quite a lot as well through our PR team, and sometimes you just have to go for it. I mean, if as a founder, sometimes those opportunities will come along and he'll think, well, what's the return on that? How many sales is it going to drive? And you can't predict that. You don't know. You can sort of have a guess and say, well, we can forecast X, or X, 10 times ROAS or whatever it might be on a piece of media, but it's very hard to predict sales in terms of that PR opportunity. PR ultimately doesn't drive sales. But it's just about, if we have got the capacity, we think it's a good idea, then of course we're gonna go for it.
And leaning
So,
into that more, don't you? Because I think, when you're working for a big company and you've got those PR agencies, they're generating all of those opportunities for like the CEO. But there's something I think a little bit special about when, a founder or a CEO has got credibility kind of in the space and the network, and then some of that, or those organic, inbounds for kind of PR opportunity, that I find those more exciting.
and you know what? Working with the founder, it's great when you do get, all this digital and meta and everything is amazing, right? But when you go back to that traditional, our products in a magazine,
Yes.
it's still actually quite exciting. And I've spent years of getting PR coverage and everything else, for the companies I've worked it with, and meet big media budgets and big campaigns and all of that. And yes, you're excited, but then when you go, oh gosh, Platinum Magazine or Top Santé or Hello Magazine, who have been great towards us, actually, really supportive. They've covered our product in editorial, and we're in Hello Magazine or we're in Elle Magazine, and it's really it's fantastic, because we all sort of celebrate that success, because I know how hard it is for an unknown brand to get that coverage.
Yeah.
So when you do get that coverage, it's just really exciting. And as a team, we just sort of celebrate that success. And because I know it's a lot of work, but when you do get it, you go, yeah. So yeah, those wins may mean, those wins mean a lot, I think, for a small business, for sure. And sometimes you just got to go for it, because you can't optimize yourself. You can't constantly optimize your business. I mean, for me, I always say that you can optimize into oblivion. You just have to go and try some stuff. And sometimes you can't measure it. You just got to go and try it and see if it works and see what happens. So
The hardest thing about marketing. I don't know about you. One thing I want to kind of pick your brain on and just end on is that being a marketing leader, like I said in my introduction, is quite hard, and it can get quite lonely at times. What's your tip for sort of building a network around you? Especially going from working in a big company where you've got huge teams of people around you, to suddenly sort of being a little bit more solo, or 2 or 3 people. Like, how do you build that support network around you?
yeah, well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because as marketers, I don't know if we've been that great at building networks previously. When you're in the job, I've always been quite reliant on my peers or friends, or agency mentors, or my teams. So not having loads of external network to support me. But I suppose up until a year ago, when I actually joined CMO Circle, which has been fantastic. I joined CMO Circle, I joined the 5-7 group, and I also joined Connected and Conquering. So all of those networks have been really useful in terms of reaching out to people. And when you have a question, I mean, those WhatsApp groups are pretty on it all the time. I mean, they're 24/7. I can't keep up, but I know, and I have actually reached out. I'm not an expert in beauty, but I've reached out to a couple of people on there, and they've been willing to grab a coffee and help me. So I think that's been really helpful over the past year, as I've moved into something different. And as you say, it's just sometimes just jumping on a call with someone or having a coffee with someone. There's quite a lot of fractional CMOs out there now, so it's just been quite helpful to do that. But I also mentor as well. So I work with the Brixton Finishing School, and I mentor new talent, which I found that, again, really refreshing and energizing, where I can give back. You've got talent coming out of university trying to get into marketing and media. So, I try and help those new marketers coming into the business and helping them succeed. So I get a lot out of that, because actually I learn quite a lot as well. So that's been really helpful, and I love supporting that network. And then I'm also a member of the Virtual Marketing Academy, so love listening to those webinars, and when I'm on my treadmill in my shed, I stick a webinar on to get me through my 5K. And I was listening to Slow the Fuck Down the other day with Emma Harris, and I know it was a webinar she did a couple of years ago, but again, it just sometimes helps put things into perspective. You know, you worry all the time as working in a startup, am I doing the right thing? And oh God, what someone, you know, what my peers going to say, or what someone going to say, or they're going to say, God, Sharon, what are you doing there? And just listening to Emma, just like, do you know what? Just get on with it. You know, life's too short, and just got to try things. And I think that's where I am in terms of, you know, just crack on and try some stuff. So I think it's just a case of whatever works for you, but going to those networks and also going to the odd event and in person is really important for me now. You know, I'm not good just on Zoom all day. I need to be with other people. I get my energy from being with people in real life. So that's really important for me. So yeah.
I second that, and I think it's sometimes, like you said, with especially with the WhatsApp groups, it can get a little bit overwhelming. But I think just you know, take what you want from it. Don't pressure yourself into thinking you've got to be that person, you know, on the WhatsApp group all the time, you know, jumping into every conversation with a view. Like, you really don't. You can jump in and jump out, and you can go to the in-person events, or you can, you know, listen to a podcast. It's whatever you need.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you just need to call your mum.
That's very true. That's very true. Or listen to an episode of CMO Therapy. This is exactly why I
Absolutely.
started it. Rather than having to call my mum, she just got sick of me. Or then my next option was having to pay for therapy, which I thought, sod that. I'll just start a podcast instead. And thank you so much. This has been a really good therapy session for me. I really enjoyed it. And I hope everyone else, hope the audience did too. So thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lucy.